Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, after you, you have a
Where would you like to sit?
in the one where you're not sitting. So I'll try this.
Okay.
Do they joke a lot here at Fresno?
Absolutely.
Do they?
Yeah. And I've enjoyed some of your jokes.
Well, you have to be careful because often someone gave me an example. They were doing a job interview, and someone asked a question that I thought was illegal and unethical and unprofessional. They asked the person to tell a joke.
Ah,
And really, there's no great way to answer that question and get the job.
that's true.
Well, thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you. We're honored to have you, and I learned a lot today
Okay.
from our students and from you, so I want to thank you.
All right, good. So they gave me some questions, and I'd like to ask, and maybe maybe I probe a little bit, maybe not. But
Great. Are we answering these together?
no, you're answering. This stage has room for one comedian. So, all right. So first, let's start with how do you identify?
Well, I identify as a man, a father, a son, Latino, a Valley native. That's very important to me. The son of a single mother, the grandson of farm workers, and president now, too.
So when you listed those, they're obviously important to you in some ways. So
Yeah.
can maybe you expand on why any of those identities would be important?
Sure. Well, I think being a father does shape the way I look at my job, and so that's a very important identity. And I'm very close to my family, my wife, my children. They're my core. And I was taught by my grandfather to really value family, and we would spend a lot of time together, and so that part of my identity is very important. And in terms of my work, it serves as a way to approach others, trying to support others and help them to thrive. And I'd say, especially in this position, having grown up in this region provides a lot of meaning to the work and identifying with the students that we serve. I think it has given me insights that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't grown up here.
Sure. Would you be offended if a magazine or a newspaper referred to you as the Latino president of Fresno?
That has happened many times, and especially at the beginning. And I remember those early days when the newspaper, when the media reported on my appointment. Much of the focus was on my ethnicity, and not as much focus on the fact that I grew up here. And so is it offensive? It's not offensive, but I found it for some people to be a distraction. And I don't see that in the newspaper anymore. I must say, over time, that seems to have not been a feature that they put in front of me. I mean, there are some publications that do, but I actually appreciate that that's not always in the newspaper because it's not necessarily always relevant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Given your identities, what are some privileges and challenges that you face as a leader?
Well, I think that privileges, certainly. I think just and I try to remember that it's the office, it's not me, that comes with a lot of privilege in terms of the things that I do and say, and I know that. I think that is something that I learned before I came, but I think it's a constant reminder, and so I try to be as thoughtful as possible. You mentioned measuring words. I have to measure words in many contexts. And you know, I get out of my comfort zone in these PCHRE dialogues, and I have to say thank you to the PCHRE because I grow personally and professionally each time that we do this. But I'd say that, yeah, that it comes with great privilege to serve in this role and to have the ability to shape a university that's been here over 100 years. And I don't take that lightly. I feel that responsibility to try to do the best I can.
Reflecting on your various identities, how are you impacted by stereotypes?
Well, I think that there have been stereotypes because I'm Latino. And I walk through that museum, I know that's another, or that exhibit, I know that's another question for a little later, but I think that I've run into that certainly throughout my career, and even as president. And Mary knows this. There have been a few times when I've been on campus at events where it's not obvious that I'm the president, and I haven't been treated as respectfully as I know I am when I have this suit on. And some of our people who may not know who I am, and that's really been insightful to me, that would happen to me, because then I know that it could happen, of course, to anybody. And that's happened in the community as well. And then it's, whoa, and they find out I am president, and then there's a little bit of a different treatment. So that has certainly come up in my career and sometimes as president.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to say this. I think for many people, professionals, especially professionals of color, they then think they have to make one of two decisions. One, wear a suit all the time.
Yeah.
Or two, challenge the system that makes that, you know, the culture that makes that necessary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I prefer the latter, actually. I don't want to wear the suit all the time. And I do think that being the first, whether it's the first woman or first person who's Latino or Asian or African American, that does come with that extra responsibility. And President Obama is one of my heroes, and I've watched him deal with those issues on a regular basis, and I've been so completely impressed with his patience in dealing with overt racist behavior from many people, and seeing your postcards, that really drives it home. But I do think that my own kind of smaller level that I've experienced some of that as well. But I'd say the Valley native part for me has made it much easier to serve. And I would imagine someone else who was the first, but maybe didn't have that background, it would have been even harder for them. And as I was walking through the exhibit today, I was actually talking with a professor from Fresno Pacific. And I don't know if she's here right now, but we were talking about my friend, President Menjares, who was their first Latino president. And he was there a very short time. And I remember how unsettling it was for me when I was working with him one day, and then the next day he was not here anymore. Chancellor Blue, an African-American woman with our community college district, I was working with her. She was on my transition team, working together. One day, the next day, gone. But this professor said something very insightful to me. She said, Fresno Pacific was not ready for Dr. Menjares. He was ready for them, but they were not ready for him.
Given the current climate and the fact that this is a forum for inclusion, respect, and equity, what do you think is important or critical for us as individuals and as a community to reflect on as we go forward?
I think the listening part is enormously important. That was a key part of my fall address here on campus. And today drove that home for me again, that everybody has a unique perspective and gifts to share. And as I was sitting there with you and others listening to our students today, I learned something from every single one of them. And I feel that way every day on this campus, that it's pretty humbling because in many respects it's extraordinarily diverse in terms of background and perspective. And to be able to lead an institution like this, it's a very special opportunity at this moment. So I'd say the listening and the learning, and our cabinet leaders, many of whom are here, we try to do that as much as we can, and I think my colleagues do that very well. And as we listen to each other carefully, and even to the silences of how people might respond to our comments, that we can learn from each other, and through that respectful civil dialogue emerge better solutions to the challenges that we face.
I meant to follow up earlier, but these are tough days for a college president. And you could end up on the wrong side of a YouTube video quite easily.
True.
Even though you didn't do anything in your own mind that was wrong.
Yeah.
So how do you avoid that and be proactive?
Well, I think it requires thoughtfulness every minute of every hour of every day, and it's a lifestyle, and that's something that I didn't fully appreciate until I was in the position, and mentors had said that this is going to be how it is, and it really is that way. So even if it's a Saturday morning and I'm going to go buy some coffee beans somewhere, you know, I have to be ready for the great part, which is, you know, little kids coming up and wanting to meet and take a picture, but it could be somebody who's unhappy about the football team and wants to engage or wants to share their view. And I just have to be ready for that at any time, and I have to be careful not to make any off-the-cuff remarks. So I've done my very best there. So I try not to embarrass my colleagues. I want us to get good, positive attention, not negative, positive attention from their president.
Okay. So you had a chance to visit the exhibit.
Yeah.
And what were some of your thoughts as you watched or viewed it?
Well, how many of you have seen it now? Yeah, if you haven't, I want to encourage you to go through, because I didn't know what to expect. And so walking through that door, the first thing that caught my attention were the crayons, because I was thinking about it from an educational perspective, how many children use crayons and what an important part of our development crayons are. And then you see Indian red, and you see flesh. Well, flesh isn't the color of our skin.
Right.
What is Indian red? And I think about our little boy who's 5.5, and in his world, these things are, he knows his friends by their name. He's not thinking about these other kinds of things, and so just seeing the crayon thing and how that could move a child to a different place is not, in my view, where we want them to be. So that struck me, just that, and how powerful that is. And then, of course, the sombrero section, because that's the connotations of laziness that I know many of us in the Latino community and in other communities of color, there's this sense that we don't work as hard. And that sombrero thing symbolizes that. And actually, since I've been president here, there was a professor, a full professor on this campus, who wrote me a letter. He was upset with me about his salary, and he took a picture. He wrote a picture of me with a sombrero. That was in my first year at Fresno State. And you can imagine how I would have liked to have a conversation with
Yeah,
him,
yeah,
but I knew that that was not
right,
going to be a good thing.
right.
And so I had to let that pass. And that was a pretty painful thing, that, you know, he could do that, not only sent it to me, but he sent it to his whole faculty. And yeah, so it reminded me of that incident and the fact that we all go through those things. If I'm going through them, I know that everyone is going through them in their own way.
I think we could, would it be all right if we took
Yeah.
a couple questions from the audience?
You bet.
Okay, so our comments, can we do that? We can't do that. We can do that. Just
They,
cut and
they
paste
get to
that.
ask you questions too, don't they?
They already asked me hard questions. Actually, when you made the comment about President Obama, I want to keep this at a certain intellectual level, but I wanted to mention Key and Peele. And the skit they do where they have Obama's alter ego, and he's the angry person who gets to say that.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
There's something to that.
I love that skit.
Yeah. And one of the things about being an administrator is that you lose in some cases. You can't banter in the same way you can't. So you couldn't respond the way a faculty member could have responded to that person.
Right. I don't think so.
No.
We need an anger translator, right?
The anger translator.
Yes. So audience, thank you for remaining with us. At this point, we're going to open the floor to some question and answer sessions, and we have some roving microphones. So I encourage you to please engage with Dr. Casper or Dr. Pilgrim.
First of all, thank you, both of you, Dr. Castro, Dr. Pilgrim. As I said earlier, it's been just a fantastic day and a half. Comment and question. Comment. Dr. Castro, thank you for your transparency. And what was that person's name? We want to know. Just kidding. We got your back, friend.
I know.
But Dr. Pilgrim, as I've been listening to you over the past 2 days and looking at these images, I wonder if you could talk about how those images impact what we see today with the violence against Black bodies, and particularly Black men and law enforcement, what the relationship is between those things.
Well, again, the images don't die, they morph. And as I said before, I do believe America is more democratic and egalitarian than it has been, but a smaller number of people can do greater damage than they could in the past because of the internet and these new tools they have. And then, of course, there's some old prejudices and hatreds that they don't die. So you take an image, or a caricature rather, like the so-called Black Boot. This is this scary, menacing, right? That started in reality after Reconstruction. It wouldn't have made sense to have it before Reconstruction because it might have become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so this scary, menacing Black, you start looking at the newspapers, and it was amazing the fear that Americans had of the Black male. And so it's not coincidental that that's also the time when lynchings went up, and this Black group became, the supposed Black group became the justifications for the many lynchings that occurred. All right, so skip ahead. Now that's the 1890s. All right, you get ahead to the 2016, you could make the argument that the dominant image, or a dominant image of young Black males is that image again. And it's very complicated because you now even have some African American young men who position themselves to embrace that because they think that there's a profit to be had in it. And we know the corporate America believes there's a profit to be had in it because we see it in movies and in music and the like. So that's one example, the idea of the hypersexual Black woman, that image that started, that caricature, and those stereotypes that started during slavery. I go to movies, I see the same thing. I'll give you one little piece, and we won't be able to get into this, but something amazing happened between 1970, I would say 68, 69, 70s, and 71, and maybe 73. African Americans, I think, were sick and tired of the Tom, the Mammy, the Coon, the Pickaninny, and all these traditional. So they inadvertently accepted a new sin by embracing so-called blaxploitation movies. Now I say that and I love some of those movies, but the reality is that we exchanged the pimp for the mammy, if that makes sense. We exchanged this one for that one and this one, and if you look at those caricatures and their stereotypes that started with blaxploitation movie, we're struggling with those right now. I rarely see a mammy. I pointed to the one case where I found a recent Uncle Tom. I mean, a real, sort of character. But I see a lot of the caricatures that came out of the blaxploitation movies. So, I mean, there's a market. And there's just no two ways about it. There's always been a market for that. I was watching a YouTube video the other day. Don't ask me a question. I don't know how to shut. They did a YouTube video the other day, and you had a black guy eating some fried chicken, just talking stuff about politics, whatever else. There must have been 20 million hits. And he was saying nothing. But see, that's, if you forgive the pun, that's digestible for the U.S. It's what we want, it's what we get, so.
Thank you. Other questions?
This question is for both of you, and you started to touch on it in terms of how these stereotypes and caricatures morph. But I'm curious, in today's reality, has it been a challenge? Has it been difficult to figure out what the newest ones are? And I ask that particularly thinking about Dr. Castro when you mentioned your son, and you talked about the crayons. I have a son who's 11. You and I have talked about that. Your wife, Mary Castro, and I have talked about that. They don't have to worry about a crayon box in 2016 in the same way we might have when we were younger. But there are new challenges. Has it been difficult for you to kind of adapt to what your children are dealing with versus how you grew up? And for yourself, Dr. Pilgrim, seeing this on a completely professional level, when you see these morphings take place, are they difficult to catch up with and identify, or how can you speak to those issues?
I'll go after you. Well, what I would say is it's not difficult for us because we have like 4 of us. We make it our business to look. We have a fairly large Facebook following, and so we have people constantly saying, "Hey, did you see this? Did you see this?" I really believe I have 5,000 people out looking for stuff, and I don't agree with all the stuff they come up with, but they hardly miss anything. Like the Trayvon thing. How many of you had never heard of that? Anybody? Yeah. That was new on me until people started sending actual photographs. Not a, newspaper thing. I mean, they were taking photographs like I was like, what the heck? So I have that group out there that does that. So for me, then I can spend my time making the connections, as it were. One real quick one would be, from say the early 1900s to the mid 1900s, there was a fairly serious debate in many parts of America about whether or not education spoiled black and brown people. Did you hear what I said? Whether or not it spoiled them. And you would think that's an idea that is dead, right? I mean, who's saying that? And just recently, some people, they were sending me some cartoons and the like, which suggested that not only was education a waste on this group, but it made them radical to the point where they were dangerous to the society or useless to the society. In other words, it did what? It spoiled them in some kind of way. So, those are more difficult to kind of point to, but the sort of the big ones, the criminal, the this, that, the other, those are fairly easy to point at.
Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Johnson, I guess the way I'd respond to your question is, Mary and I have an older son, so 29 almost, he's back there, Kiel student, and then we have a daughter who's in college now, and then we have our little guy who's in kindergarten. So we got kind of different generations here in a sense. And And I think with each one, I've tried to understand who they are, what they're going through, and the good and the tough parts. You know, Isaac's life has been different than Jess's will be, and just how enormously privileged he is compared. When Isaac was Jess's age, we lived in an apartment that is the size of Jess's bedroom in the university house. And so their lives are completely different, but as Latino men, they will have similarities in terms of the challenges they face, and I know that. And the same with our daughter, different kinds of challenges as a woman. So I think it's been helpful for Mary and me to understand those challenges and to try to support them in the best way we can, and then to use those in my professional job to inform judgments that I have to make or decisions. But again, I'm humbled by the complexity, and I just try to understand this landscape, knowing that it's changing all the time. And what I might feel comfortable knowing about 1 year is not going to be relevant or as relevant in the next year. So it's continuous learning from everybody and trying to be as thoughtful as possible. And because our students are so diverse, you and I have spent a lot of time with the ABC group, and I have learned so much through those interactions, to see Fresno State through their eyes, because I was seeing it through different eyes, obviously, and to now see it through their eyes has been extraordinarily helpful in terms of the decisions that we need to make so that they thrive here. And then listening to the talented student this morning who said people don't look at her eyes because of how she visibly presents. But just trying to learn from each of those perspectives and to do the best job we can to serve them all. And if I could ask you a question.
You can ask me, yes, you got me here.
I would love to know how this Jim Crow exhibit has shaped the culture at your
At school?
your college.
Yeah. Well, I think the university now takes pride in it. So even the people that might not otherwise support it, they like the good that it brings to the institution. It certainly is a resource for our students, and we're displaying now probably 8,000, 7,000 maybe pieces at the school, and it's done very professionally. So, I think it's working well. We also have now a sexism collection, which is a couple thousand pieces, and so we're having those. I think people have just gotten used to the ideas. When it first started, I got charges of being anti-white and, of being a racist, demagogue. I got that. Now that we're working and the sexism collection is taking off, and more people are calling me sexist. So I can't wait to do the ages piece and some of the other stuff. So you call me young. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, I got a lot of personal, and I'm not bragging or complaining, just stating the fact. You don't build a sexism museum or a Jim Crow museum in higher ed and it just goes smoothly. It's just not the way it works. So there were lots of arguments and there were lots of personal kinds of things, but we got it done.
That's great.
I like the job I'm in. And I wanted to make a couple comments as Chief Diversity Officer or Vice President.
Yes.
One of the things we did early on, and by the way, I left the classroom and became a Vice President over the weekend. And the distance between my two offices was probably 500 feet, but the real distance was probably 50 years. I mean, it was just a long way from there to there. First thing I did was organize a campus-wide group, including probably half of the people who thought that I shouldn't have the job. So I made sure they were on there. And then I challenged the institution that we were going to start from scratch. So we actually ended up redoing our core values, our mission, vision, just the whole thing, all right, which is difficult.
Yes.
And we had arguments and debates, and then I said to the president and the board, if we're going to do this, we have to have a separate diversity plan, but it has to be incorporated into the strategic plan so that it'll actually get done. So we started a year-long set of arguments. They weren't discussions, arguments. They weren't. It was brutal, man. But it was perfect for us.
Yeah.
And so we started with what is diversity, and we ended up with a definition, and we ended up with a definition of inclusion. And actually, several universities in recent years have called me on the phone or written me saying, listen, do you mind if we take your definition of diversity and your definition of inclusion? And I say, yes. I can't stop you, but I do mind. One is the administrator in me, because 2 years from now, someone looked on the internet would know where it came from.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you need to have those arguments. You need to have those debates. You need to do what we did.
Yes.
And so we had those discussions. And so another year went by. We came up with a plan. And since then, we have another plan, which is now a diversity and inclusion plan, which is 5 years later. And each of the vice presidents in their divisional plans have to account for the initiatives in the diversity plan. But, like LGBT issues at our school were so bad that when we first tried to have a meeting, we had members of that community who would not come to the meeting because they feared, some kind of retribution. We've come I am so proud of how far we've come, but we had a long way to go.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. We all do.
yeah. Well, you're doing some things here I like. I like this food pantry. You need to be commended for that.
Thank you.
And everybody out here who gives food to that, you need to be commended. Because there's, we all talk this, not all, but a lot of us talk about compassion, but feeding folks is fundamental.
Yeah.
And then you have this transportation system, and that's awesome. You got the tuition waiver. Not a lot of schools, especially where I come from, so people can work and they can still get educated.
Yeah.
You have a clothing facility for students.
Yeah. Clothing closet.
Yeah, you have a clothing closet. So, you're doing some good stuff. And I heard the people today talking about some of their experiences. I don't want to make excuses for things, but we still are in the United States. Okay, so some of the bigger
Yeah.
issues, they're going to come here too.
Yeah.
But I like a lot of what I'm seeing here at Fresno.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's...
No, there's still another question if we have time.
They won't let us go.
Got a vice president back there with her hand up.
She has her hand up, okay.
Hi, I have a question, and one of the student panel speakers today kind of mentioned and you also talked about it when you were presenting your PowerPoint, when somebody asked you the question, when you become, like the kind of work that you do, and I know there's probably people in the audience who sometimes become so tired and angry, and I think I myself, I work in diversity, and I'm an undocumented student, and you get tired.
Yeah.
You get tired because sometimes there's 12 people,
Yeah.
but there's only one of you that's really taking on the work and tokenism. That's why sometimes you get hired, because you are the Latina, you are the immigrant, you are the person who graduated from the high school. But there's times where, sometimes throughout my life, I don't want to go to work because the stories, and then sometimes you can't even do what they hired you to do because the system is not set up for you to thrive and really help that population. So how do you deal with it? Like you mentioned it, and I'm sure just writing and the research is draining. How do you take care of yourself? Because there's times where I wish I didn't know all the things I know because it's exhausting. So just wanted to hear the both of you.
Well, I'll start. I'll say this. I don't do a good job with that. And secondly, I'm going to still need you to come to work. So, no matter how bad, it's still going to work. But yeah, I don't do a good job. And I was telling someone yesterday, I have the worst professional habits as a writer because I binge write. And I wish I were like my friends who can put 2 hours, they know 2 hours on a Thursday evening, they're gonna do this, 3 hours this evening. I've never been that person. I've written to get stuff out. And so for me, what that's meant is working to exhaustion, and the subject is really bad, you know. So I've never been good at this in terms of taking care of myself part of it. I know the advice that people give me, and I can pass some of that on to you, but I'm a hypocrite because I don't do it. But that advice tends to be things like, you know, finding ally groups, allegiance groups, alliance groups, in other words, other folks, and a place where you can download and you can deprocess. And actually just, this is gonna sound like really corny, trite advice, doing something that's physical, that has nothing to do with the work. So whether it's paddleball or swimming, not gambling, that's a whole other issue. But some, I'm telling you, not gambling. But something that kind of takes your mind away from that. I mean, again, it doesn't solve the issue once the sweat dries. But getting yourself away from that setting. So you can't do it alone. But you're talking to a person who does a bad job in his own life, and who's also watched many, many friends become alcoholics. Let's be honest with you, become despondent, become professional dropouts, because they felt they beat their heads up against so many walls, and the system didn't change soon enough. So, and by way of bad news too, is it's not going to change enough in your life for most of us that we can see a discernible difference, especially in the sense of what we did. And so I think we have to have realistic expectations. Well, that was cheerful, wasn't it?
That was. I understand, and a lot of that resonates with me. I guess the only thing I would add is I've been there too, and I think what I've learned over time is to enjoy and celebrate the victories, even if they're not enormous victories, even if they're small victories. But that gives you more energy for the fight ahead. And I think if you could try to do some of that could help. But I understand, and I think part of that comes from a sense of not being sure your voice is heard. And so from that perspective, I really want folks to know that we want to hear your voices, and they will be heard. Whether it's on the feedback page or sending an email, and I assure you that we listen to everybody's suggestions and we respond to them. And, so I want to also share that with you, but celebrate the victories. And we've been having quite a few of them around here lately because of the teamwork we have, and yet I know how much more work we have to do. There's such tremendous need that exists out there that we need to try to address better and to go to that next level. So that's all I can add in addition to the great advice over here.
We have one question back there.
Dr. Pilgrim, it has been a true pleasure to spend some time with you the last day and a half. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
President Castro, I am curious about what you feel our faculty, staff, students, administrators should aspire to make this an even healthier campus culture. And what do you feel that we're already doing well?
Thank you. This is Vice President Custodio, and that's a big question.
It is a big
couple of
question.
big questions there. I think you've heard me talk about this. I want everybody to thrive at Fresno State. And what does that mean? That means that we're all learning and growing and achieving our personal goals, and that's why we've been supporting professional development as much as possible. So rather than having great people do well here and leave, which sometimes I know is best for them, I'd rather grow together and keep folks here because I think our university becomes stronger by having that continuity. And as people retire, of course, new people and new ideas, it also strengthens the university. So I would just encourage folks to continue to grow, to challenge, to look for ways that you can get more involved in the university. And I think together we're going to be able to go to a much higher place. And I don't think it's necessarily a matter of money for professional development, because at least right now we're trying to commit as much as we can, and it's just being strategic about the best use of that for our faculty and our staff. And I know Provost is here, and she's made that a cornerstone of her priorities, investing in our faculty. And Dr. Pilgrim, we actually have 69 new tenure-track professors right now, the most we've had in many, many years. And so developing them along with our other faculty, very important, and the same with the staff quality. So I think those are some of the thoughts I'd have. And each of our vice presidents, and Paul is one of them, really believes in developing their staff. And I think that makes a huge difference as well, hiring people who have that philosophy to really grow each other's capacity to serve.
Hi there. I wanted to ask, actually, both of you, but more specifically to Dr. Pilgrim. I am from a deaf family and a deaf community, and myself as a doctoral student, when I was a doctoral student and I had gone through the program and I experienced, either family members or friends in my profession, and they would say, why are you, or they would make comments that basically the crowd theory applies to that, where they would sort of say, why are you doing that, and what are you doing, and you shouldn't be doing that. And so for you, I'm just wondering, even though perhaps people in your community did not have the same educational privilege or passion that you did to get their doctoral degree, I'm just wondering how you succeeded or how you handled that in your own life.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you're experiencing that. That's not, I'm going to apologize on behalf of people I don't even know. I'm sorry that you're going through that. One of the things about my situation, it has to do with my age. I'm a part of that generation of black and black identified people who came right when America was the doors were being pushed open. And so I went to a historically black college, Jarvis Christian College, and while I was there, I was told, this is your turn, you lucky son of a gun, you better work hard. We worked hard, we never got our chance, this is your chance. So it was all of that. So we were driven. I was that generation. There's a couple people of my age, you know what I'm talking about, where we were told, you can do it. Now, we were also told you got to be twice as good, you got to work twice as hard. We were all told that. So we were studying like there was no tomorrow. And then the other part of it was this, and I hardly ever hear anyone say this anymore. I'm not saying it's good or bad, I just hardly ever hear anyone say this. When I walked across the stage at the Ohio State University, I actually accepted my degree on behalf of every black and brown person who had been denied an opportunity to receive one. And I didn't see that as a burden. I saw it as the logical extension that the civil rights cases, the marches, but even before that, the big, not being allowed to attend schools, getting poor, beat up textbooks, in the 1920s, and the whole education will spoil you from the plow foolishness. And all the way through the civil rights movement, a movement of poor people, not of well-known ministers. My degree, for me, was their degree, and I know that sounds, we're so far removed from that, I almost feel like I have to apologize to say it now because we're that far removed, but that was a fairly common thing with my generation, it was that this is all of our degree. And so when we said thank you to everybody, it was an actual thank you to all the people that paved, that paved the roads. So I didn't think I couldn't do it. So in a sense, it was a different, that's why I said it was a different situation, and I apologize to you for people for those people not encouraging you. And for what it's worth, even though I'm coming in at the end or where you're near the finish line, I want to encourage you.
Yes. I too want to encourage you. I believe in you. I know you can do it. We're so fortunate to have you here. And the benefit of having you here is that you know how it feels to be treated in that way. And you can interrupt that. And I remember having some folks in my life who really wanted me to succeed, and some who didn't, who made it harder for me. And I remember one professor, when I was getting my doctorate, he would change the time of his class meetings, even though he knew I was working. He didn't want me to work, and he knew it was a delicate schedule for me. I was going back and forth between two universities. He would change his schedule so that it would make it harder for me. And I pledged, as painful as that was, I would never do that to anybody else, that I would model a different behavior and overcome that, of course, but then, take that and apply it to, positive ways. And I know what you mean about the degree representing more than ourselves, because I felt that way for my whole family and the community, and that's a special feeling. So I hope that you'll have that pride and then apply that energy in positive ways for those who come behind, who are going to need that support to succeed. You're a trailblazer. Thank you.
Any other questions we can take? Do we have time for one last one?
Hello, thank you
Hi.
for everything today. So when you were talking earlier about wearing a suit and being treated differently, earlier this week in one of my HEAL classes, we were actually talking about that. And one of my colleagues works on campus and identifies as Latino, and he specifically said he wears a suit every day to work, even though he's a student coordinator, because he feels the pressure to do so, while his colleagues who don't identify as Latino, they wear shorts, tank tops, other things like that. So I had a question prepared, but I decided to text him and said I'd let him know that you had experienced the same thing, and I asked him if he wanted me to ask you anything, and he did. So he's actually wondering what your internal dialogue is with that, and growing up with that feeling and how you experience that now. I think he's looking for some words of wisdom as far as how to make it through, because it feels unfair.
Sure. Well, I'd be happy to meet with him. He can reach out to
Would
me.
love
I'd be
that.
happy to sit down with him. The internal dialogue, you really want to hear that? I don't know. Share that. No, I just want to validate his frustration, because I've certainly experienced that, and I prefer not to wear a suit. If I could get away with it, I would have Hawaiian shirts on every day. And in fact, when I put a Hawaiian shirt on, our little boy goes, "No work today," because he's so used to the uniform. And yeah, I think because of the conventional business practices that are beyond my control, I can't go into a room with donors or other people and do that most of the time, although I do push it. And as much as I can, I try to be comfortable, but all I can do is validate the internal dialogue and to say that over time, I hope it'll get easier as more diverse people enter professional roles, and maybe that tipping point will finally get here. But I think it will be a challenge in the foreseeable future, and I think it just requires a balanced approach, and it depends on how aggressive he wants to be. And, you know, I know my son, my oldest son, he looks at things a little differently than I do. He's a little more aggressive, Joe Castro, than I am, and I think that's good. I think over time, we're going to be able to push those bounds and make progress, but I'd be happy to sit down. Thank you.
Thank you, you two. We really appreciate your heartfelt comments and your
Thank
honesty.
you. Pleasure. Enjoyed that.